You know, if chess openings had personalities, the Caro-Kann defense would be the strong, silent type. It's reliable, it's resilient, and, well, it's maybe a little misunderstood. So today, we're going to unpack the character of this famous opening and help you figure out if it's the right fit for your style. Let's dive in.
All right, picture this. You're playing black, your opponent slams down their king's pawn to e4, and you're tired of those chaotic, tactical knife fights you get in something like the Sicilian. You want something you can trust, right? A fortress you can build from the very first move. If that sounds familiar, then the Caro-Kann might just be your perfect match.
So, what is the fundamental character of this opening? Well, it all starts with its reputation as an absolute defensive powerhouse.
Okay, after white plays e4, black responds with c6. Now, this simple-looking move is preparing to fight for the center with d5 on the next turn, but it does it in this incredibly sturdy way. The Caro-Kann is a fortress. Seriously, it's famous for being one of the most resilient and low-risk responses out there. It's a favorite for players who love to just absorb pressure and then when the time is right, strike back.
But here's the thing, being solid doesn't mean being passive. Not at all. The Caro-Kann has this really clever strategic idea at its core, and it all revolves around one specific piece. To really get the genius of the Caro-Kann, let's quickly compare it to its close cousin, the French defense. Now, in the French, black almost always ends up with this bad bishop on c8, totally trapped behind its own pawns. It's a huge headache. The Caro-Kann solves this problem brilliantly. By playing c6 first, black supports that d5 push without locking in the light-squared bishop. This means it can get out into the game, usually to f5, before the pawn structure gets fixed. It's a game changer. Of course, an opening isn't just a single line of play. The Caro-Kann can have totally different moods, and it can lead to very different kinds of games depending on how both you and your opponent decide to play. First up, we've got the classical variation. This is the most traditional path. Black's game plan is pretty straightforward. Get that light-squared bishop out to f5 early and start putting some pressure on white's knight. The strategy here is all about the long game. Black is perfectly happy to trade pieces and head for an endgame, because in the Caro-Kann, you're confident that your pawn structure, the very skeleton of your position, is going to be a huge advantage later on. But what happens if white gets aggressive? Well, in the advanced variation, white shoves the e-pawn forward to e5, trying to cramp your position. From here, white has a choice. They can go for a slow positional squeeze with what's called the short variation, or they can go for the jugular with the tall variation, launching this all-out attack on your king side, often starting with a move like h4 to just cause chaos. And then there's the Panov-Botvinnik attack, one of the sharpest lines you can face. It's a classic strategic trade-off. White accepts a long-term weakness, this thing called an isolated queen pawn, which is basically a pawn that's a sitting duck, in exchange for getting their pieces out fast and having immediate attacking chances. So your job as black is to survive that initial storm, shut down the attack, and then go to work on that weak pawn, which becomes a permanent target for the rest of the game. And hey, for those of you who want to sidestep all that heavy theory, there's the two knights variation. It's a more modern, kind of tricky approach that can lead to some really sharp and complicated tactical positions right out of the gate. It's a fantastic choice if you want to surprise your opponent and get them out of their comfort zone. Okay, so with all these different flavors of the Caro-Kann in mind, let's zoom out. What are the fundamental trade-offs you're making when you decide to play this opening? Look, playing the Caro-Kann is a clear strategic choice, and you got to know what you're signing up for. On the plus side, you get that rock-solid reliability, a fantastic pawn structure for the endgame, and you solve that pesky bad bishop problem. But on the downside, your development can be a bit slower, you often give white a space advantage in the opening, and let's be honest, it can sometimes feel a little passive. And this balance of pros and cons leads us right into the heart of the great debate about this opening's entire character. And here it is. This is the harshest criticism you'll ever hear about the Caro-Kann. The haters will say it's just too passive, that by its very nature, you're basically playing for a draw from move one. But is that fair? Well, it's not quite that simple. What looks like passivity is actually a calculated strategy. By giving up a little space early on, you're essentially daring white to overextend, to push too far. Winning with the Caro-Kann takes a specific kind of skill. You need patience, you need excellent defensive technique, and you need the confidence to handle slightly cramped positions, all with the goal of outplaying your opponent in a much better endgame.
Which brings us right back to the big question. Is this the right opening for you? Do you enjoy building that unbreakable fortress, weathering the storm, and just patiently grinding out a win in the endgame? Or do you crave space and action right from the start?
Ultimately, the character of the Caro-Kann really just reflects the player who's moving the pieces. Is it a solid fortress laying the groundwork for a brilliant counterpunch? Or is it a passive waiting game, just hoping your opponent makes a mistake? The beautiful thing about chess is the answer is entirely up to you.